Everyone was excited for the future of the MCU after Endgame. The Infinity Saga had just ended perfectly, with a little bow, and the fandom at its peak. When Kevin Feige announced the overwhelming number of projects to come, everyone lost their minds, especially because of the severe content drought due to a certain virus. WandaVision was the first of many, promising a new style for the MCU. It was actually refreshing to see something new, a love letter to sitcoms with its unique creative direction, until it ultimately gave up on that style and ended with an average CGI mediocre ending that had zero repercussions for Wanda.
They'll never know what you sacrificed for them.
Not even Doctor Strange cared about what happened in that show.
I'm not here to talk about Westview.
It set the tone for what was to come. Average Marvel projects with poor expectation management and lousy writing. A Doctor Strange movie where he explores the multiverse that goes into chaos? Actually just one underwhelming alternate universe that gets overshadowed by another movie about the multiverse the same weekend.
You serious?
A Black Widow send-off movie to a character we know and love? Actually just a film where Natasha gets overshadowed by her own sister to make way for the MCU's new cast.
Ugh, that was disgusting.
A finale to the Spider-Man Trilogy that comes full circle of what it truly means to be independent and learn from others and oneself? Actually, yeah, this one's great, and it's not even made by Marvel. Regardless of the disappointing previous projects, everyone was still really excited when they announced the title and cast. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, featuring Kang the Conqueror. What could possibly go wrong? The movie's plot was as entertaining as being stuck on the 405 freeway during rush hour. It felt like Marvel had a checklist of classic tropes in order for it to be greenlit. Quippy one-liners to not take itself seriously whatsoever? Check. Lots of CGI to overwork an already exhausted VFX team? Check. How did we even get here? The old phases were never like this. We went from scenes like this.
You said you loved my mother.
And that I did. But it broke my heart to put that tumor in her head.
To this.
I was willing to do anything he wanted. If he asked me to burn the world down, I would have asked him.
Beef or vegetarian?
Honestly, I walked out of the theater thinking that the writers had just procrastinated until their deadline and had an AI write the movie for them. Wait a minute. The movie took everything good about the previous two films and straight up scrapped it all. No more low-scale movies with a charismatic cast and memorable characters. Now it's a huge, VFX-heavy, high-stakes movie with the whole multiverse on the line. It completely forgets what made the Ant-Man movies enjoyable in the first place. The first two aren't the most popular, but they did something new and were super creative. They were fun. Scott shrinks in a bathtub, fights in a suitcase, someone throws a large Pez dispenser. Ant-Man in San Francisco, a widely recognizable city, was so entertaining because his abilities allowed for creative scenes in such iconic locations. In this movie, they completely removed the shrinking and enlarging elements and set it in a generic CGI background. The ensemble cast from the previous two movies are nowhere to be found as well. The three wombats, who are arguably the best part about the last two Ant-Man movies, are gone. I think Marvel didn't put Luis in this movie because he would have overshadowed Kang, which is fair because the only reason why I would watch the last two films are for Luis.
See, that's what I'm talking about.
We're introduced to the grown-up Cassie Lang after Endgame, who seems to have done a complete 180 from the last time we've seen her. This time, all the joy was sucked out of the girl we saw in the last two, and now she's an unlikable know-it-all. I mean, it makes sense for a person to change over so much time, but it's so unbelievable that this little girl turns into this.
Stop the cap.
She ends up in jail numerous times to protest homelessness in San Francisco. Somehow that's the most far-fetched thing about the whole movie. We can't even solve that problem in real life, and we didn't even have the blip. She constantly berates her dad for not doing enough, and the movie sympathizes with her when she does. After saving the whole universe and being a world-renowned hero, he's somehow the problem. It felt like Cassie was ashamed of her dad instead of looking up to him like she used to do. When new characters we know nothing about seemingly start to hate on established characters we are already emotionally invested in, it makes the audience dislike them already. If they wanted us to like Cassie, well, they went the wrong way about it. Cassie's also supposed to be setting up the future of the Young Avengers and taking on the Ant-Man legacy. Except she's at a disadvantage from the start because we're so attached to Paul Rudd's Ant-Man Passing the torch for these iconic characters isn't easy and normally tends to cause controversy among the fans. And we've seen this before. It shows Marvel is starting to care less for older characters in favor of cash grabbing the new ones. And on top of everything, Cassie is suddenly a quantum expert who makes quantum plot devices for fun because time has passed. Oh, and apparently it can also suck you into the quantum realm, by the way. They give a weak explanation that she studied Hank's notes during the blip, which would make her some kind of prodigy as a teenager to be able to understand and engineer such a complex machine. Doesn't that sound a little familiar? Oh, and by the way, where is her stepfather, who's literally a cop, seemed to care so much about her in the previous two movies, but is completely absent when she's arrested? Not to mention her mom, who also doesn't make an appearance for some reason. The whole family situation in the film is also really weird. They're kinda anti-Scott, pretty much calling him selfish, and none of the actors look like they even want to be there. Paul Rudd, Michelle Pfeiffer, Jonathan Majors, Michael Douglas, they're all great actors, but were given a horrible story to work with. Michael Douglas doesn't even need to be in the movie, and Hank only serves the purpose of being confused and lost the entire time. A complete assassination of his character. He's not even trying to hide the fact that he doesn't want to be there either.
If they did a fourth, would you come back?
As long as I could die.
The film is called Ant-Man and the Wasp, except the Wasp does nothing the whole time and doesn't really need to be there. She's more of an afterthought than a main character, which shows that they never really cared about Hope to begin with. Her chemistry with Scott is still missing, which is really sad because they've had two other films to build up their relationship. For me, it felt really weird and forced when Scott told her he loved her at the very end. Overall, it was just an awkward scene. In this movie, it focuses more on Janet, the former Wasp, who refuses to tell anyone anything the entire runtime when they need it the most. It makes zero sense why Janet didn't say anything about the quantum realm, about Kang, or any of the civilizations at all. She decides to keep everything to herself because she wants to be a mom again. Like she can't warn the world about this guy and still be a mom? Where was all that energy for this scene?
The collection unit activates when you decouple it. It should automatically start absorbing quantum healing particles.
Also, make sure you stay out of the tardigrade fields. They're cute, but they'll eat you. And don't get sucked into a time vortex. We won't be able to save you.
Janet doesn't care there, so why now? And the whole conflict could have been avoided if she just told Hank what went down, which he's had at least like 2 years to do. And after teasing them for more than half of the film, she finally decides to tell them about Kang. Also, all of the writers somehow forgot all of the rules they set for the quantum realm too. No more shrinking for all eternity, or that the realm messes with your mind. Instead, now there's other human-like people who speak complex languages. Somehow there's gravity and oxygen, a government dictatorship, space cantinas, alien broccoli people, spaceships, a generic-looking army, a rebellion resistance. This is straight up Star Wars! The story also fails to make you care about the new ensemble cast of characters. We meet the Resistance, a goofy silly gang of characters who capture Scott and Cassie. Cassie immediately sides with these people, despite knowing nothing about them, and once again pretty much calls her dad selfish. But don't worry, they're the good guys apparently, because they're funny and obsessed with holes, so stop thinking, okay? Were we really supposed to care about that light bulb guy dying? Their main purpose was to pretty much basically die by Kang and make him seem scarier, but they failed at that too. They also blame Scott for leading MODOK to them when they were the ones who captured them and brought them back to their home base in the first place. Also, the writers took the Baskin-Robbins joke from the first movie and completely ran it into the ground 1,000 times to make sure you really understand that Baskin-Robbins? Yeah, they sponsored this movie. How did the Baskin-Robbins guy show up like 3 times but not have any of the ex-con characters anywhere? Even Jimmy Woo makes a cameo. That was a good one though, good job Marvel. And we cannot forget MODOK. Bro, what is this?
Hi, how are you?
If this isn't blatant proof that the VFX team was overworked, then I don't know what is. MODOK in the comics is a pretty interesting villain. He's a genius mastermind with psychic powers who's normally depicted as a mad scientist gone rogue. Over the years, MODOK's evolved into a less serious comedic goofball, the butt of the joke. In this rendition, they went for the butt. Literally. He's formerly Darren Cross, who was somewhat of an intimidating enemy for Scott in the first one. I mean, Darren was not that comedic and was pretty serious in his ambitions. The last time we saw him, Scott pretty much killed him and ruined his life. So of course, Darren would have lots of built-up resentment towards him, leading him to ultimately try and kill Scott and his family. But nah, his arc in the movie is laughable. He eventually turns against Kang, who built him up and saved his life, just because Cassie hurt his feelings? The same girl who he tried to kill in the first movie redeems him. It's okay though, guys. He dies in the end as an Avenger, which was kind of funny. I chuckled a little bit. I mean, it's impossible not to laugh when he looks like my thumb. Bruh. Now this movie is the first film of Phase 5. And if this phase is anything like the movie, well then it's fair to say it'll be another flop like Phase 4. We didn't get an epic conclusion to the Ant-Man Trilogy that would have tied into the overarching story the other two films told. And we didn't get an epic beginning to Phase 5 like we were promised. What we got was a wannabe Star Wars meets PG-13 Rick and Morty meets Wizard of Oz, with the sole purpose of setting up the new big bad, Kang.
This is the start of Phase 5. It's the biggest event.
Kang the Conqueror is the new iconic villain in the MCU.
When I tell you this movie is Kang's homecoming party, it is Kang's homecoming party.
Jonathan just has it all. I mean, he is like the actor of his generation. He's really exciting.
Jonathan Majors is fantastic in it. Like, all the buzz you hear about Jonathan Majors playing Kang totally lives up to the hype.
All of the work in this film that you've done, what are you most excited for fans to see about it?
Kang.
Get Kang!
Kang!
We get Kang! We get Kang! Kang! Kang!
Despite what everyone seems to be saying, Kang the Conqueror was not the best part about the movie and does not live up to the hype. With promotions saying that he was on par with Thanos, I went into the movie expecting a hugely terrifying villain. This is the guy who is allegedly the next Thanos of the multiverse saga. Things are gonna go down. To my disappointment, the only reason why Kang left me on the edge of my seat was because I was desperately waiting for him to finish his sentences. It didn't help at the beginning of the movie that we met Kang in a weakened state on the ground half alive. What also didn't help was that this Avengers level threat was humorously mauled by a bunch of socialist ants. Whenever Kang was angry, I couldn't help but laugh because it reminded me of Harry Styles' acting face from Don't Worry Darling. And all of Kang's threats felt empty because we didn't know if he would deliver on those threats. He says he's killed Avengers in other timelines, but we've never seen him do that. All we see Kang doing is lasering nameless civilians in random timelines that we don't care about. What made Thanos so menacing was that he beat the hell out of the Hulk and killed Loki within the first 5 minutes of Infinity War. We actually saw him do this, and you knew he meant business. Kang threatens Cassie's life so that Scott will assist him with his plan, arguably the turning point of the whole film. He says that he'll kill Cassie and trap Scott in a time loop, forcing him to watch that moment over and over again. Imagine if he had actually killed Cassie, rewound time and said next time, I won't rewind. This would have instantly raised the stakes and emotional beats of the film. The end fight scene between Scott and Kang would have been so much more impactful and elevated an already pretty good scene. It was a little silly seeing all those Kangs in a stadium act like children, but maybe that's what they were going for, I don't know. Overall, it's not really a great start of what's to come from this supposed big bad. Finally, the film ends right back where it started, as if nothing had just happened. It leaves Scott with some paranoia, and I was kind of scared to see where it actually would go from there. But once again, nothing. Everything's supposedly fine and dandy, probably until the next Avengers movie in like 3 years. If the point was to be silly and weird, then I guess it was successful, but not for the right reasons. It was silly and weird because of how bad it was, not because that was what they were going for. It's not a great comic book movie like some people are saying it is. That's just an excuse for the laziness of the film. There are other great silly comic book movies like Ragnarok or Guardians that do the job just right. To be honest, it felt like there was no passion or love put into the script. Marvel just had deadlines and they wanted to quickly rush it out like fast food, not supplying us with quality content. Their focus here is clearly on quantity. They hype up these movies to get us excited to see them, knowing what they're telling us is a lie. And audiences are starting to get tired of the lazy content we're watching and pushing back. The only movie to gain a huge profit in Phase 4 was No Way Home, and they only got a portion of that profit. If Marvel doesn't get their act together, it'll end up just like the Star Wars franchise. The MCU is in real danger, and it's not because of Kang. It's because of the rushed, low-effort projects that they're making.